She saw the boy in the snow and didn't think twice. He was sitting on a bench in Grant Park, shoulders covered in white, hands bare, coat too thin for the weather. His head was slightly down like he'd been told not to move. Amora didn't ask permission. She walked straight to him, grabbed his hands, felt how cold they were, and lifted him immediately. "Yeah, we're not doing this," she muttered. He didn't fight her. Didn't even look surprised. That alone told her something was wrong. She carried him straight across the street into the nearest coffee shop. People stared. She didn't care. She sat him by the heater, ordered the hottest chocolate they had, and started rubbing warmth into his hands. His fingers were stiff. His face pale. Still no crying. Still no panic. The cafe door opened. 4 men walked in. Big. Serious. Scanning the room. Nobody had to announce who they were with. The whole place went quiet. Then another man stepped in behind them. Black wool coat. Calm posture. Eyes that went straight to the boy. The kid stood up immediately. "Dad." The man walked over slowly. He didn't look angry. He didn't look relieved. He looked focused. He placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder and checked his hand himself. Then he looked at Amora. "Who are you?" "I brought him in. He was freezing." "Alone?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "Someone put him there." "Not lost. Not wandered. Put." He looked at her again. "And you found him?" It wasn't appreciation. It was assessment. "He needs a hospital," she said. "My men will handle it." "No. He needs a pediatric doctor." One of the guards shifted slightly. The man didn't blink. "You're very sure?" "I work with kids. He's not fine." The boy grabbed her sleeve. "She helped me." The man noticed that. Then the boy said something else. "I want her to come." Silence. The man looked down at his son. Then at her. Decision made. "You're coming." Outside, black SUVs were already lined along the curb. Engines running. Headlights cutting through the falling snow. The guards moved in sync. Doors opened before Daniel even reached them. Amora hesitated for half a second. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood this was no ordinary family. Then she stepped inside. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing them into quiet leather and tinted glass. Daniel sat across from her. His son stayed beside her instead of moving to him. Daniel noticed. "Did anyone speak to you?" he asked his son. The boy shook his head. "Did you see anyone watching?" Another shake. Daniel leaned back slightly, thinking. Someone had left his son in freezing weather. Not to kill him, but close enough. That wasn't random. That was controlled. And controlled meant intentional. The SUV pulled into the hospital emergency entrance. Before the vehicle even stopped fully, 2 guards were already outside clearing the way. Inside, the atmosphere shifted quickly. Nurses recognized urgency when they saw it. Eli was placed on a bed. Warm packs were applied. A pediatric doctor examined his hands carefully. "Mild frostbite starting," the doctor said. "You brought him in at the right time." Daniel asked one question. "How much time?" Another 30 to 40 minutes outside, it would have been worse. Daniel gave a single nod. Amora could see it now. Not panic. Not rage. Calculation. Someone had timed this perfectly. Eli sat still through the exam. When the warmth started stinging his hands, he winced slightly. "It hurts," he said quietly. He didn't look at his father. He looked at Amora. Daniel saw that. And something changed, small, but visible. After treatment, discharge instructions were given. "Keep him warm tonight. Monitor circulation. If the skin darkens, bring him back immediately." Daniel signed the paperwork without argument. When they stepped into the hallway, Eli turned to Amora. "You're leaving." There was no drama in his voice. Just expectation. She hesitated. "I'll stay until you're asleep," she said. Daniel studied her. He didn't interrupt. Didn't object. After a moment, he said, "You'll ride with us." It wasn't a question. Back in the SUV, The city lights reflected against the windows. Snow streaked sideways as traffic moved. Amora finally looked at Daniel directly. "You said someone put him there?" "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. "Because they couldn't reach me." That was enough explanation. The SUV turned into a secured underground garage beneath a high-rise downtown. Private elevator access. Keycard clearance. Security cameras everywhere. When the elevator doors opened into the penthouse, Amora understood the level of control this man operated under. The space was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Marble floors. Minimal decor. Expensive. Cold. Eli walked inside without speaking. Daniel removed his coat and handed it to one of the guards, who disappeared immediately. "Go change," Daniel told his son. Eli nodded and walked down the hallway without hesitation. No argument. No request. Just obedience. Amora took in the silence of the space. No television noise. No music. No evidence of a child actually living there, except for the hallway he'd just walked down. "You live here alone?" she asked. "With my son," Daniel replied. "It's quiet. It's secure." She didn't push further. Eli returned a few minutes later wearing soft lounge clothes. He walked directly to Amora. "Come." He didn't ask. He expected. She followed him to his bedroom. It was large. Organized. Too organized. Shelves lined with untouched toys. A perfectly made bed. No drawings on the walls. No scattered books. She sat beside him. "Are you warm now?" He nodded. "Why didn't you move from the bench?" "My dad said stay. Even if it hurts. Even if it's freezing." She tucked the blanket around him. "You can say when you're cold," she told him quietly. He looked at her. "I know." But the way he said it made it clear, he didn't think he was supposed to. Within minutes, his breathing slowed. He fell asleep. When she stepped back into the living area, Daniel was standing near the window overlooking the skyline. "He's asleep," she said. Daniel nodded. "He listens to you," he said after a moment. "I carried him into a warm place," she replied. "That's not magic." Daniel turned slightly. "He doesn't attach easily." That explained the grip on her sleeve. The request for her to stay. "He lost his mother 2 years ago," Daniel said calmly. "No emotion attached to it. Just fact. I focused on structure after that." "Structure doesn't replace comfort," she replied. Daniel looked at her carefully. "You speak freely." "I work with children every day. I recognize loneliness." Silence. Not tense. Not hostile. Just heavy. "You walked into something tonight," Daniel said. "And it wasn't accidental." "I walked toward a freezing child," she answered. He studied her again. Then said something unexpected. "You'll stay tonight." Not as an order. As a decision already made. "For him," he added. She nodded once. "For him." And just like that, she crossed a line she hadn't planned to. Not into danger. Not into romance. Into responsibility. Because someone had used this boy to send a message. And Daniel Kang was not the type of man who ignored messages. But for the first time that night, his son was asleep. Warm. Safe. And that wasn't because of power. It was because a stranger saw him in the snow and didn't hesitate. And Daniel knew it. The next morning, Amora woke up in a place that didn't feel lived in. The guest room was spotless. Neutral walls. Heavy curtains. No personal details. It felt more like a hotel suite than a home. For a second, she wondered if she had made a mistake staying. Then she heard movement down the hall. She stepped out and found Eli already awake, sitting at the kitchen island. A glass of orange juice in front of him. 2 security men near the entrance. Daniel standing by the window on a phone call. Eli saw her first. "You stayed." It wasn't surprise. It was relief. "I said I would," she replied. Daniel ended the call and turned around. "Good morning," he said calmly. It sounded normal. Too normal. She nodded. "How are his hands?" "He'll be fine," Daniel replied. "Doctor confirmed it." Eli flexed his fingers slightly. They're okay. She walked over and checked them herself. Warm. Circulation good. Good, she said. Daniel watched closely. Not suspicious this time. Observing. You have work? He asked her. Yes. You can take the day. It wasn't phrased as an order. But it wasn't exactly a request either. I can't just cancel, she replied. Daniel nodded once and picked up his phone again. Within minutes, she received a text from the hospital. Emergency coverage arranged. You're cleared today. She looked at him. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, he replied. It wasn't about control. It was about keeping her there. Eli looked between them. Can she stay? Daniel looked at his son. You want her to? Eli nodded. Daniel made another decision. She stays. Simple. Later that afternoon, Amora followed Eli through the penthouse. She noticed things more clearly now. There were toys. Expensive ones. Still in boxes. A gaming console. Unused. Books neatly stacked but never bent open. The place wasn't empty. It was untouched. Do you have friends over? She asked. No. Why? They don't come here. Why? He hesitated. Dad says it's safer. Safer. The word echoed. Security cameras on every level. Guards at every entrance. A private elevator that required clearance. This wasn't just wealth. This was a fortress. Daniel entered the room quietly. He does online school, he explained. That's not what I asked, she replied calmly. Daniel studied her. He is protected. He's isolated. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't need to. He knew the difference. That evening, during dinner, something small happened. Eli dropped his fork. He flinched slightly. Daniel looked up. Not angry. Just alert. Eli picked it up quickly. I'm sorry. Daniel paused. For what? Eli froze slightly. For dropping it. Daniel leaned back slowly. You don't apologize for accidents. It was the first correction she had heard him make. Eli nodded quietly. Amora noticed it. Daniel noticed that she noticed. Later, when Eli went to shower, Daniel poured himself a drink. You analyze everything, he said without looking at her. I work with children, she replied. You think I'm doing something wrong. I think you're doing what you know. He turned to face her. And that is control, structure, silence. Daniel didn't deny it. It keeps him alive. And does it make him happy? Silence. Daniel didn't answer that. After a moment, he said, his mother was different. How? She was warmth. That explained a lot. When she died, the house became quiet, Daniel continued. I focused on business. On eliminating threats. And he focused on not being one, she replied. That landed. Daniel didn't react immediately. But the tension shifted. Not hostile. Honest. You speak freely in my home, he said. You brought me here. Yes, he said. I did. Upstairs, Eli finished his shower and walked back into the living room. He walked straight to Amora and sat beside her. Not near his father. Beside her. Daniel watched that closely. That night, Eli didn't ask if she was staying. He assumed she was. Read to me, he asked. She looked at Daniel. Daniel nodded once. Permission. She followed Eli to his room again. This time, she noticed something different. There were drawings in the drawer. Hidden. She pulled one out gently. It was a picture of 3 figures. A man. A woman. A child. The woman had bright colors around her. The man was drawn in darker shades. The child stood between them. You drew this? She asked. Eli nodded. That's Mom. And this? Dad. And you? I'm here. He pointed to the middle. You stand between them? She asked. He nodded again. I keep them together. That sentence stayed with her. When he fell asleep, she walked back into the living area slowly. Daniel was waiting. He draws? She asked. I didn't know. She handed him the picture. He studied it quietly. Longer than expected. He thinks he keeps you together, she said. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He doesn't need to carry that. He already is. Silence. Daniel set the drawing down carefully. You believe he needs you, Daniel said. I believe he needs consistency. And you are that. I could be. That was bold. Daniel didn't react with anger. He reacted with thought. You would stay, he asked. For him, she said. Daniel looked toward the hallway where his son slept. Then back at her. Someone targeted my son yesterday, he said calmly. That doesn't end easily. I know. And staying here puts you inside that. I know. Another long silence. Daniel walked toward the window again. Chicago lights stretched below them. Finally, he spoke. I will find who did this. She believed him. There was no doubt in his voice. But something else had shifted too. He wasn't just thinking about revenge. He was thinking about his son. And for the first time, someone had stepped into his home and told him something he couldn't solve with power. That loneliness wasn't an enemy you could eliminate. It had to be addressed. The next morning, Eli woke up smiling. That alone was new. Daniel noticed. And for the first time in a long time, the penthouse didn't feel completely empty. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just slightly warmer. And Daniel Kang, a man who controlled everything in his world, was beginning to realize that control wasn't the only thing his son needed. And the woman who carried him out of the snow wasn't just temporary. She was becoming necessary. 3 days passed. Amora hadn't planned to stay that long. But every morning Eli woke up expecting her to still be there. And every morning, Daniel allowed it. The security presence outside the penthouse increased. Extra rotations. Extra vehicles in the underground garage. Daniel was moving pieces quietly. But inside the apartment, something subtle was changing. Eli was talking more. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just more. At breakfast one morning, he asked his father a question. Are you coming home early tonight? Daniel paused. That question alone was new. Yes, he said. And that night, he did. Amora noticed. Daniel wasn't suddenly warm. He wasn't affectionate. But he was present. That was different. Later that evening, while Eli worked on homework at the dining table, Amora stepped into Daniel's office. It wasn't hidden. Just separate. Large desk. Screens. Quiet power. You're restructuring something, she said. Daniel didn't look surprised she noticed. Yes. You said someone used your son to send a message. Yes. And I am removing the parts of my world that allow that. That was more than security. That was business. You're stepping back, she said. I am eliminating leverage. His tone was calm. But this wasn't small. You're dismantling your own operation. He looked at her. For him. There was no hesitation in that answer. That was the first time she fully understood. Daniel wasn't a reckless criminal. He was strategic. If the Empire made his son vulnerable, the Empire would shrink. Simple. Does he know? She asked. No. Maybe he should. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He is a child. He's a child who thinks he has to hold this house together. That landed. Daniel leaned back slightly. You believe he carries responsibility? I know he does. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. Amora heard him pacing softly in his room. She knocked lightly. You okay? He nodded. But his eyes said otherwise. Come sit, she said. He sat beside her on the bed. Do you ever think it was your fault? She asked gently. He froze. That reaction was answer enough. I shouldn't have been sick that day, he said quietly. That stopped her. What day? The day Mom went to the hospital. Her chest tightened. She stayed home with me. If I wasn't sick, she wouldn't have. No, Amora said firmly. She turned him to face her. That was not your fault. He looked at her like he wanted to believe it. But Dad doesn't talk about it, he said. That was the problem. Grief had been locked away in this house. And Eli had built his own explanation in the silence. Daniel was standing outside the hallway. He heard it. Every word. He didn't interrupt. But he heard it. Amora continued. When something bad happens, your brain tries to find control. It tries to blame something. But sometimes things just happen. Eli's eyes filled slightly. He didn't cry loudly, but he leaned into her. And that was the first time Daniel saw his son allow himself to break, even a little. Later, when Eli finally slept, Daniel stepped into the living room. "You told him it wasn't his fault?" "Yes." Daniel nodded slowly. "I should have done that." "Yes." He didn't argue. He walked to the window again. "You know why I kept everything quiet?" he asked. "Because it was easier than falling apart." He gave a small nod. "I built this life for protection. For power. For control. But I did not realize I was protecting him from the world while isolating him from it." That was the most honest thing he had said yet. "You can change that," she replied. "I am." The next morning, something unusual happened. Daniel cancelled a meeting. He took Eli out. Not with guards walking 2 feet behind them. Just one vehicle at a distance. They went to a private indoor basketball court Daniel owned. Eli didn't know how to play well. Daniel didn't either. But they tried. Amora watched from the side. Not interfering. Just observing. Eli laughed. It wasn't loud. But it was real. Daniel heard it too. And that moment mattered more than any business contract he had ever signed. Later that week, Daniel made a call that confirmed his decision. "I want out of the shipping contracts," he said calmly into the phone. There was silence on the other end. "That's not negotiable." He hung up. Amora was in the room. "That's a major move," she said. "Yes." "You'll lose power." "I will gain safety." For the first time, his priorities were visible. Clear. Focused. Eli walked into the room then. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. Daniel looked at him. "Yes." "Where?" "Home." Eli frowned slightly. "We're already home." Daniel hesitated. "No," he said softly. "We're building one." Amora felt that shift. Daniel wasn't just adjusting schedules. He was rethinking everything. And for a man like him, that was monumental. That night, while Eli was asleep, Daniel spoke again. "You changed the rhythm of this place." She shook her head. "No. He did." Daniel understood. Eli had chosen her. And through that choice, Daniel had been forced to look at what he had avoided for 2 years. "You could leave," Daniel said quietly, "and I would still have to change." "That's true. But you're still here." "Yes." That silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was steady. Something was forming. Not rushed. Not dramatic. But real. And outside, somewhere in the city, the person who had placed Eli in the snow had no idea what they had started. They thought they were sending a threat. Instead, they triggered a transformation. And Daniel Kang was no longer just reacting. He was rebuilding. For his son. And whether he admitted it yet or not. For her. The warning came 2 weeks later. One of Daniel's security teams intercepted a vehicle circling the tower 3 times in one night. Different driver. Same route. Not coincidence. Daniel didn't panic. He didn't raise his voice. But something inside him had already changed. Before, retaliation would have been immediate. No. He went home first. Eli was in the living room building something out of blocks. Amora sat nearby, reviewing paperwork from the hospital. Daniel stood there for a moment, watching. This was the difference. 2 months ago, he would have gone straight to the problem. Now he walked toward his son. "Hey," Daniel said. Eli looked up. "Are we in trouble?" Daniel paused. "Someone is trying to scare us," he answered honestly. "But you are safe." Eli studied him carefully. "You're not mad." No. That mattered. After Eli went to bed, Daniel made his calls. The last remaining contracts connected to his old operations were cut. Shipping routes transferred. Private security dissolved. Offshore accounts emptied and redirected into legitimate businesses. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. By the end of that week, Daniel Kang no longer operated in the shadows. He stepped out of them. Not because he lost power. Because he chose his son. The next shift didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly. Daniel began having dinner at the table instead of in his office. He attended one of Eli's online school presentations. He asked questions. Listened to answers. The penthouse started to feel different. Not louder, but warmer. And the change wasn't just in Eli. Daniel began asking Amora questions too. Not about child psychology. About her. How did you decide to work with children? He asked one night. Because they're honest, she replied. And adults aren't. Adults hide. He gave a faint smile. Not all of us. She looked at him carefully. Most of you. He didn't argue. That silence between them wasn't tension anymore. It was familiarity. One evening, Eli walked into the room holding a drawing. It was another family picture. This time, there were still 3 figures. But the space between them was smaller. He handed it to his father. Daniel studied it. You're closer, Eli said simply. Daniel crouched down to his son's level. We are. And then something unexpected happened. Eli looked between them and said, I knew she would stay. Amora blinked. What do you mean? Eli shrugged slightly. I waited. Daniel's eyes shifted. Waited. In the park, Eli said. I knew someone would see me. That realization hit both adults at the same time. Eli hadn't been careless. He hadn't wandered. He had trusted that someone would step in. He had trusted that someone would choose him. And he had been right. Daniel looked at Amora. Did you know? She asked softly. He shook his head. But he understood now. His son hadn't just needed rescue. He had needed connection. Months passed. The threats faded. Without leverage, Daniel became uninteresting to his former enemies. There was nothing left to threaten. No underground contracts. No vulnerable deals. Just a legitimate business portfolio and a guarded but stable home. And in that time, Daniel changed in ways he hadn't expected. He laughed occasionally. Not loudly, but genuinely. He sat beside his son during homework. He asked how he felt instead of instructing him what to do. And slowly, he began allowing himself to feel something else. One night, after Eli had fallen asleep, Daniel stood beside Amora at the window overlooking the city. You didn't run, he said quietly. I wasn't being chased. You were. She looked at him. You walked into a dangerous world. I walked toward a freezing child. He nodded. And stayed. Yes. There was no dramatic confession. No sudden intensity. Just honesty. You changed this house, Daniel said. No, she replied. He did. Daniel looked down the hallway toward Eli's room. Then back at her. And you changed me. That one wasn't corrected. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a public event. It was private. Small. Intentional. Eli wore a tailored suit and stood between them as they exchanged vows. Not because it looked good, but because it felt right. When Daniel placed the ring on Amora's finger, he wasn't thinking about power. He wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about the night he walked into a coffee shop expecting betrayal, and found the woman who carried his son out of the cold. When Amora said her vows, she didn't mention wealth. She didn't mention fear. She spoke about presence. About choosing someone every day. Eli held both their hands when it was done. The same way he had drawn himself between them in his pictures. Only now, he didn't need to hold anything together. Because it wasn't fragile anymore. Later that night, after guests left and the apartment was quiet again, Daniel walked into Eli's room. You knew she'd stay, he said softly. Eli nodded. You're not scared anymore? Daniel asked. Eli thought for a moment. No. Daniel sat beside him. Neither am I. That was the truth. Daniel Kang had spent years building walls to protect what he loved. But it wasn't walls that saved his son. It was warmth. And the woman who refused to leave him sitting in the snow.